And welcome to an hour with the Candidates Corner on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henchman, Chair. As always, we've got John Gapso on the big board. And of course, my name is Pat Ford. I'm your host, proud chair of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. As always, there are a few purposes for this show. We give the libertarian community worldwide an opportunity to meet our wonderful down ballot candidates. The term down ballot candidates is a euphemism that we consider honorable here in the party. We've got a wonderful array of candidates who ran in 2020, some who are running in special elections in the coming months, and an entire array of candidates who are already gearing up for 2021 and 2022, if you will, candidacies. The future is now. Over the year or so that this show has been on the air, we've met an incredible selection of candidates running for everything, well, from town councils and water boards, school departments, mayoralties, state representatives and senatorships. Tonight, we're meeting hopefully a future congresswoman, United States senators, governors, and everything in between. Celebrate the fact that with elected libertarians around the country, they are acting not as only as role models, but as stewards for shared community resources that are being voluntarily put to work for the good of the community with a keen perspective from the libertarian movement. In this show, we challenge our candidates to be able to discuss what we always call here lunch pail issues. Remember Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid, right? But we want to talk about them not through the conventional wisdom, not through, if you will, the urban legends, not through the nonsense that's often perpetuated and perpetrated by the duopoly, but through that unique libertarian philosophy. We celebrate here on a weekly basis the libertarian statement of principles. Equally, as always, we try to create a bond here between candidates running from around the country and all the individual affiliates out there. The candidacy that we're going to discuss tonight for a special election in Louisiana for the United States Congress is as important to the libertarian movement, its philosophy, and the advances we're making in terms of public recognition and understanding of what we believe in. It's as important to folks in Maine or California because the word continues to spread. There is a groundswell of both emotion, popular sentiment, education, and understanding of why, particularly in these most troubled of times, whether you're trying to work your way out of an horrific situation in Texas, months ago, California facing the same exogenous events, all of that can be reflected through how we believe government should serve people, and quite frankly, when government should just simply get out of the way. Great opportunity tonight to discuss Louisiana politics. And who doesn't want to talk Louisiana politics? Some of the most legendary characters, reprobates, and leaders have come out of the bayou. We're going to meet now, I think, one of the emerging leaders of the libertarian movement in, I'll call it, south central portion of the United States. Mindy McConnell is joining us. She is running for the United States Congress, Louisiana, the big number 2. We'll get into the construction of her district, if you will, in just a little bit. But to say the word gerrymandered comes up, wait till you see this, folks. Somehow we've got an individual here who's going to represent both New Orleans, which you all know and love from our recent convention just a few years ago, and Baton Rouge. Mindy, thanks for joining us tonight, and welcome to an hour with the candidates.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. And so let's start from the very beginning. You mentioned you've seen the show a couple times. You know the first question every week, but the diversity of answers reflect really the unique coalition that's come to form the libertarian movement in this nation. How did you get involved with the Libertarian Party, and what was your libertarian moment?
Yeah, I think at its heart, at my core, my libertarian moment was probably when I was 18 years old, registering to vote in person, looking at a card and trying to figure out which party I was going to register with. And I ended up just checking independent because I wasn't sure. I knew that didn't, at 18 years old, I didn't believe in the Democrat ideals. I didn't believe in what Republicans held as their platform. So I wasn't really sure. And it's been a bit of a journey since then to figure out if there is even a political party that my views align with. And I've kind of run through a few things. I was constitutionalist at once, no party for a while. But at the heart of it, when I really think about what made me realize that I am a libertarian, is just simply thinking through, what do I believe? Okay, and this party believes all of that also. It was just a natural fit. And then once I met other libertarians, I entered a whole new world. I didn't even know that there were so many similarly minded folks out there, and there are so many. And it's really been wonderful to get together with local libertarians and have that bond.
It really is a revelation, isn't it? When all of a sudden, that first time you walk into a crowded room, and you the first conversation we have, you realize you've sort of come home. That there are an incredible diversity of people, backgrounds, beliefs with respect to other portions of their lives, but this nagging doubt that you might have had in your mind before you go to that first libertarian event, am I the only one? It's really a testament to the strength of the movement, because ultimately so many people go through that same journey. We all did. Listen, as I always joke about it, I was a volunteer for Richard Nixon in 1972. I was 12. Okay. But, we've all gone through that journey. You're running for the United States Congress for the 2nd District. I know this is a special election. Give us a little bit of a snapshot on the special election process, how it's conducted in Louisiana, and some of the challenges you're facing. Give us just sort of a little bit of the backstory.
Yeah. So this seat has been held by a Democrat, Cedric Richmond, since 2010. And so he was a senior member of the House. This district, there was actually a lawsuit, I believe, with Alabama and Georgia. A group of Black voters sued, saying that the districting representatives of those states were intentionally creating majority minority districts. And this is one of those districts that was at the heart of that lawsuit. Whether that is or is not true, it certainly seems that way. All other districts in Louisiana are red. This is the one blue district. And it is carved out. I mean, it's really carved out by neighborhood. Even my own, I don't even live in the district. I live a few blocks outside of the district, because it kind of goes street by street. In this race, I mean, along with that, it's primarily a slew of Democrats. So 15 people ended up entering this race to run. And when I decided to run, it was the same day Cedric Richmond resigned. I knew immediately, like, I need to get in there and do something, because I can't just sit by and let the country continue on without intervening. And I really thought there would be maybe 4 or 5 candidates, but we're at 15 candidates. I think 10 who are Democrats. I might be a little off on that. 3 Republicans, myself, and 2 or 3 independents.
Wow.
Yeah.
The frustrating part about campaign finance laws throughout the nation, and each state's got its own unique twist or twisted version of them, is that so many people are running up for office in order to raise money, well, for a lot of things besides, running for that office. You have people who will jump into elections like this and try to build equity and try to build their own little brand within that. And, you wonder often how many of these folks were actually serious. Are they, ready to be boots on the ground in a few minutes? In the conversations we've had, it's clear that if the light switch goes off tomorrow, you're one quick flight away from getting involved and advancing the libertarian movement within the United States Congress. Give us a really, and it's tough to do because, I've spent some time in Louisiana. It's an amazing place. Yet you've got the capital city and what many people in the country think is the spiritual capital. They're not exactly right next to each other, but there's a drive involved. You don't often see that. As you pointed out, this district is sort of Frankensteinian in its creation. It was created clearly for political purposes, but are the similarities, the differences? What are the challenges? And we always like to break it down: COVID and pre-COVID. Before COVID hit, what were the challenges facing your part of Louisiana that could be addressed by a federal officer?
So the challenges, Louisiana and Baton Rouge, I'm sorry, New Orleans and Baton Rouge share very similar challenges because the river is just such a huge part of our life, our lives, our economy. Everything in Louisiana is based on the river, even when we speak just directionally, industry-wise. So I know that there is room for federal support with things that Louisiana needs that benefits the country, and that's a lot of coastal restoration. Those things are in place. We don't need to legislate or seek any more funding for those things. Although coastal restoration is going to be important for anybody in Louisiana. Also important for the country, but again, all right, there is reform needed in oil and gas, certainly. That is a third of our economy in Louisiana. This administration, is very intent on crippling that. But for anybody in the state, particularly Baton Rouge and south of Baton Rouge, we need to really hammer hard on the measures that the Biden administration is taking. We've already been hit really hard in the pandemic in our oil and gas industry, but Biden's just doubling down. It's going to cripple us because of the immediacy of it.
Mm-hmm. Different parts of the country have very different perspectives on the federal government. If you go into some of the mountain states, the Bureau of Land Management is sort of it can be an omnipotent force. If you go into particularly parts of the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, ICE and its border enforcement issues can be omnipresent. In the case of Louisiana, it's kind of curious because it's the Army Corps of Engineers that really has a real impact on the quality of life in coastal Louisiana. I had family down in Mississippi, prior to Katrina, and some stayed. They were transplants, mostly military. But what role does the Army Corps of Engineers play in sort of civic life in Louisiana with these ongoing natural disasters and the reactions to it?
The Army Corps of Engineers plays a huge role. I, at this point, kind of think they're our saving grace, but on a daily basis, I mean, they're here and they work every single day to do research on the river, what the river needs, and of course, they're continuing to do the civil engineering work. Without the Army Corps of Engineers, I think Louisiana would really have to shift a lot of funding and state resources to figuring that out. But they're here every day, making sure that our coast is protected. And they're critically important for all the residents here.
What's their relationship like with state government? I mean, and equally, in citizens, is it a fractious one? I see, from a distance, I see the smoke signals of controversy rising up from time to time. Do they play nice with the state of Louisiana? And is the state of Louisiana? I mean, a lot of us don't have a high opinion of government in Louisiana in general. And I don't know why I'm entitled to say that because I live in Rhode Island, but no shining beacon, no frontier of courage here. But could Louisiana even manage that situation based on the kind of corruption that seems to be part of the DNA down there?
And then, you see, that's what I think that the answer is no. Could, of course, but they're doing a good job. The relationship is fine. When things go wrong, people naturally will try to always point fingers at somebody. So if it's anything to do with, hurricane disaster or levee issues, they're going to just jump to the Army Corps of Engineers. But the relationship between citizens and the Corps is fine. The government, the state government, and the Corps, it's fine. It's a welcomed relationship, but we're always going to point fingers at somebody.
Education. Clearly, most libertarians would, very often when they're asked which part of the government would they instantly eliminate, I was able to take the high road tonight. The Department of Education comes to mind. Talk to us. You've got a career in education and at a prominent level. Talk to us about the lessons you've learned in education, the type of, without getting into the specifics of the school, but the type of school that you are an administrator of at a high level, and your experience and your thoughts on federal involvement in education and education formulas.
Yeah, so I am really honored and grateful to be a part of the only 100% charter school district in the country. New Orleans is 100% charter schools. And, it was a journey to get there. It did have a lot to do with Katrina and rebuilding schools after Katrina. But I run an alternative middle school for students who have been expelled or who have significant social, emotional, and behavioral needs. And because we are a charter school, we are really able to help students in a way that a traditional school would never be able to do. Charter schools, when they're run properly and with accountability, are able to serve students like students need to be served. You're really able to get individualized instruction for all students, get to know families, get to tailor the school to the needs of the community. And I see that with all schools in New Orleans. It's been a process, and along the way, there have been many schools that have closed down because they were failing and they were not doing a good job. But I think that is what you get with a charter school system. You really get to say, like, you know what, you're not cutting it for our students, so you have to go. And it leaves high quality schools for all students.
That's an astonishing concept. Let's talk about that for a second. The notion of schools, you have to go home now. You don't get to be a school anymore because you consistently fail your students. What type of failures was it? Was it based on testing? Was it observational? How did they come to the conclusion that a school had truly failed?
Yeah, and that's a point of controversy. And also, before I answer your question, I'll add that there is a very tense relationship between the community members and the school system. The community members do not like charter schools. So, it's a battle. And part of that reason is because there have been schools that have closed. And as a parent, of course, you're like, you failed and now you're closing. My child went to the school. Now my child has to find a new school. And I certainly understand that point. What happened was before Katrina, New Orleans public schools as a whole were failing students on principle, but students were literally failing, not able to pass basic literacy exams upon graduation. The graduation rate was 54% of students were graduating high school. And so after Katrina, the state took over and started issuing charters to schools. And that is how we got to where we are now. And so on that journey, there was a lot of talks about school accountability. So school accountability currently is it's a multi-tiered formula. It's based on test scores. It's based on each student has kind of a rating based on demographics and socioeconomic status. And so, like, the type of students that you're serving is also taken into account. And so there's a lot of factors, and then each school gets a letter grade each year. And that's your grade. And if you're failing, if you have an F for, I think, 2 or 3 years, then you have like a year to pass, to remediate that. And if not, then you lose your charter.
And I know we're getting kind of a little bit into the weeds here in education, but your experience and the high level that you operate, it gives I'll say a familiarity and intimacy and expertise on the system that I don't know that a lot of people serving the United States Congress have. Yet, outside of the pandemic and outside of our some of the challenges we have with foreign affairs, this is clearly what we talk about lunch pail issues. This is the lunch pail issue. American families exist with a primary task, a primary responsibility to educating their children, and we are in a down spiral in this nation, which is already having calamitous results in our ability to compete economically and ability just for people to enjoy their lives and fulfill their human potential. Are these talk about the funding, if you will, and what's the involvement of the federal government, if you will, into what degree in Louisiana schools?
So the school federal government, of course, they still get federal education funds. They are set. It's changed a little bit. At some point, funds were directly going to schools. At this point, we've kind of centralized a little bit. We've created a central charter school office in New Orleans. So the funding is going to the central office, but the schools get funding based on how many students they have. It's just distributed according to numbers. Schools can go anywhere. Students can go to any school in the district, but the funding is fairly distributed to all schools, which is a lot different than traditional school districts. That's it.
No, that's great. What have the results been so far with this type of innovative approach to education?
So we have now an 84% high school graduation rate, compared to pre-Katrina at 54%. You will find locals who will argue relentlessly that charter schools are destroying kids. But when you look at the data, literacy rates are up, test passage rates are up, graduation rates are up across it's been a complete 180.
Right.
Yeah, totally. And then even during the pandemic, I mean, when you have a single school who has autonomy over its money, your schools are able to just allocate that as needed. So in our school, we sent teachers to students' homes if the students weren't comfortable coming to campus into a learning hub. We were able to get tech out easily. We were just able to redistribute our money, our school funding, so what was needed to get students computers and hotspots and teachers sent out to schools, all of that. You just when you have autonomy in education, you can do a lot more than red tape.
That's outstanding. And that's ultimately, and as I like to say, I'm Captain Obvious here. As libertarians, we argue about local control. If in fact there are going to be shared resources and there's going to be shared support amongst the community, then the support for that needs to be at a local level. Number one, because of accountability. But as you point out, you as a school principal are able to target challenges, target deficiencies, target impairments like a laser. And you're as a professional, you're able, all the skills that you've accumulated, all the experience you're able to utilize in favor of these children. That's outstanding. We have to talk obviously about energy policy. Louisiana has been impacted. What's going on there on the ground right now? We're obviously focusing nationally on Texas and Oklahoma, but how much has this impacted your potential congressional district?
Are we talking about the weather related?
Everything. Let's start with the weather.
The weather, yeah. So Baton Rouge was out of electricity for 2 to 3 days. All parts of the state had the rolling outages, which is absurd. That an energy company will just decide that today you're not going to have electricity. They actually cut off the electricity to our sewage and water board pumps that clean our drinking water.
Excellent.
Right. But it's all unacceptable, and it's a multi-layer thing. Certainly, one part of it is overtaxing the grid, and we get that. But there is a component that not a lot of people are talking about, which is the pricing of natural gas caused distributors to just choose not to use as much natural gas. So there was certainly some decisions by distributors to not provide us with what was needed to get the energy flowing and people's lights on.
Well, much has been made about Texas's independent grid, if you will, and they're taking slings, arrows, as well as folks providing rational explanations, which is what we need right now, not politicians grandstanding and fundraising off of a humanitarian crisis. How is Louisiana set up? The irony, of course, in all of this is that southeastern Texas and Louisiana are, if you will, the energy capitals of a good part of America. So we're confused because we see offshore all this production, all these transportation methods being utilized to bring all these pipelines, everything seems to be right there, yet we can't process it. So how does Louisiana manage their grid? Are they part of a regional complex? Does the state government run it like they do in Texas?
So in 2013, we joined MISO. I'm not going to know what that acronym stands for, but it's the shared the shared energy authority, who we send all the energy to MISO, and then they distribute it to the states who are part of MISO. So even though we're producing a lot of, honestly, we're producing enough resources to serve ourselves, but we send it to them and then they redistribute it back to us and other states.
How important, because these are obviously going to be issues which are going to rely on a lot of technical information. This is, despite the expertise in Facebook that you find in everything from epidemiology to constitutional law on a daily basis in Facebook chat rooms, we are all now finding that there's the Facebook Graduate School of Energy. Who knew in a few short days it could pop up, right? So there's a lot to be discussed. There's a lot to be digested. But ultimately, do states within these grids, do you feel like they should be taking it upon themselves to have that sort of come to Jesus moment, for lack of a better term, to have that sit down if you're from New Jersey and analyze their problems? Or do you think that the influx now of federal regulators is going to help us? What's the topside approach as a young congressperson?
Well, I think, the federal regulation never helps us. So I'm going to go ahead and write that off as the best option. It sounds selfish, but just as a state advocate, I definitely believe there's a way for Louisiana to take care of Louisiana. And then when there is excess energy, which there mostly will always be, then we can contract with other states to provide our resources. But as an advocate for the state, and I think this is one of those cases where we need a system that lets us capitalize on our own resources. Mm-hmm. And if we just let the energy market run its course and not have federal regulation, I don't think it would have taken care of this problem specifically. But we would definitely not be in this super complex web amongst states where we have to have federal regulation.
Right. No, what's challenging for the economy writ large is that whether it be the supply chain of virtually any industry, or which largely runs on what they call a just-in-time philosophy, or our energy grid, we are now seeing, or it's being exposed to us, the frailties of the intense interrelationship between events. One thing goes wrong. Interestingly enough, you've got in Texas, with the power grid going down, it's a significant manufacturer of semiconductors. The very same semiconductors are in shortage to the entire automobile industry, which had already been experiencing shutdowns because of the inability of these manufacturers to cope. Now, they're being shut down in a period in which they should be having explosive production. It's the domino effect has been astonishing. You get elected to Congress. What's your goal? I mean, on one level, it would appear obvious to the rest of us that, given your experience as an educator, and with the term boots on the ground comes to mind, as someone who's been a principal of a charter school in an educational complex arrangement, that someone like you should probably be the head of the Department of Education, as opposed to what goes on in Washington right now. But what would your dream committee assignment be? You get elected. Where do you want to go right to work?
Yeah, I mean, I think education committee, certainly, because that would be my comfort area. And I want to say that I should not be the president of school choice reform, right? I am very pro school choice, but I definitely recognize that in some areas of the country, and probably maybe some smaller towns, definitely in wealthier neighborhoods or counties, they probably have great school districts. I think that the formula that New Orleans has found, it will be optimal for lower income school districts. but I'm really really in favor of high quality education for all. I think education is the route to equality. So education committee for sure. Everybody wants to be on the Ways and Means committee. So maybe that second.
Okay.
And I'm a huge proponent, again, for oil and gas. And the piece that we did not talk about is the federal leasing, federal leases, restriction on wells. All of that is impacting us greatly. Energy reform is a huge issue for me. I think I recognize that we have climate change. We need to progress and evolve, certainly. There is a way to do it, and the way that this administration is doing it is not the way. It's not good for people. It's hurting people in Louisiana. So that's big. I'm also intent on getting into Congress and deregulating as much as I can. I'm personally getting more afraid every day that we are heading towards socialism, particularly with progressive, this new wave of progressive legislators who we have.
Right. Let's talk about something like the $15 minimum wage. Again, you work as a congressperson, you're involved in some areas that are literally part of some of the tourist capitals of America, but at the same time have areas of profound poverty. From your perspective, what is a $15 an hour minimum wage going to do to the small business community in high cost cities like New Orleans?
Yeah, we know that is going to put our lowest skilled laborers out of a job. If I own a small business and I have two high school students who come in after school for $8-9 an hour, but now I have to pay them $15. Well, then one of them is going to lose their job because I'm getting 2 for 1. It's the most harmful thing for the low income community, and not to mention at a federal level. It doesn't even make sense to say that in Massachusetts, $15 minimum wage, and in rural Mississippi, $15 minimum wage, that's going to have the same effect on people. It's not. Right. A federal minimum wage just doesn't make sense for the many different economies that we have per state. I do think. I think a minimum wage is important, right? We don't want to have slave labor, right? But it needs to be very local.
It's again, having spent a little bit of time in New Orleans and just following it because it's just an amazing place. The Times, you read that, you look about the minimum wage restrictions, you look about their new restrictions on Airbnbs, which served as a significant part of the redevelopment of greater New Orleans post-Katrina. You look at all of this anti-business, it's not even sentiment anymore. It's certainly not rhetoric. All this enacting, putting into place barriers for businesses to act independently. Again, the hallmark of your charter school is your ability to manage it to the needs of its constituents, which is the families and the children who attend that school. Many of them, if you're operating a school for children who have been expelled, you may be the last shot for a number of these families, as is the local businesses that very often can be first-generation immigrants that are trying to create a toehold here in the United States and generate economic activity. We've only got a few minutes left, but if you were to say to your federal partners, if you will, when you're one of the chosen 435, and the gold dash goes back up on that little chart that we all knew to grow and love over the last few months, if you will, of the 2020 United States Congress, what would you say to them about freeing the human spirit and freeing people to engage in activities that they choose in a manner in which they choose to ennoble themselves and to rise their communities up? What would you say, sitting next to a couple of hardcore Democratic congresspeople, if you will, when they look at you in shock as you vote against their legislation?
I would say your legislation is going to put the people who you are claiming to help out of work. It is going to further the poverty level in many urban cities. And you're going to take away the opportunity for people to start up new businesses.
Pretty much sums it up. You've got a compressed election period here. We, in a sense, these special elections are a godsend to the movement because they give us an opportunity to shine. And for folks like you who are working hard to bring our philosophy to the forefront, what's actually involved? I mean, do you have a ballpark number of what a win is going to be? Any idea what turnout? I mean, are they doing mail ballots? How is this going to work? You've only got a few weeks left.
And early voting starts March 6th for 7 days. Mm-hmm. I entered this race to win it. I know that it's important in libertarianism for us to always have people on any ballot to further the movement. But I am here to win the race, and I happen to be a libertarian. So I'm fully committed to doing everything that I can. And I'm saying me, but it's really we. It's my whole campaign team who is amazing and doing a lot of work, a lot of long hours. It's a unique situation. This district has not had a special election for a congressional race in the last 15 years that I know of. I don't know before then. The one special election, or the few special elections are averaging about 30,000 voters, but those are not for congressional races. They're for state races. So we really don't know what to expect for voter turnout. Again, this Cedric Richmond held this seat for 11 years. So will, replacing him drive voters to the booth? I don't know. Special elections, again, are averaging about 30,000 voters. We are a Louisiana, you need 50% to win. If nobody gets 50%, the top two candidates of any party go to a runoff. So in that case, it looks like if I can get 30% of voters, then I'll get into the runoff. And whether that 30%, is 10,000 or this in November, I think the district had 300,000 voters turn out. So I don't know that piece, but I do know that 30% should get me into a runoff.
Excellent. One of the challenges of us connecting to get this interview on board was the sheer diversity, range, size of events, both digitally and in person, that you and your campaign are representing at. Talk to us about the mechanics of the election process, your ability to get out there and meet with people. Who are some of the groups that you've reached out to?
Yeah, we've done a lot. I think the pandemic maybe is helping. It's definitely in our favor because everything is on Zoom. We have one in-person debate next week in Baton Rouge. Outside of that, everything's been on Zoom, and it appears to be equal access to the events that we're being invited to. I think I've definitely been pleasantly surprised with how many organizations are just inviting all candidates to show up. So we've had access. The thing that we don't have is money, and I hate to say it, but that will be, I think, the thing that holds us back in the end, and it's because I can't run $50,000 TV ads.
Right.
We're getting on the radio. We do have some funding. We just don't have enough funding to compete with the two big parties, who have tons of money being dumped into their campaign.
Right. And we saw that in Georgia, certainly, when Shane Hazel running against, literally hundreds of millions of dollars being poured into a campaign. I can't imagine, I'm with that kind of entree into the race, it's pretty much guaranteed, I think, that there'll be a runoff. I can't imagine what a runoff will be like for a formerly blue seat or in a state with the politics that exist in this country right now, which is why it's critical that, again, every week we go to the well. And I want to thank folks who have reached out a lot in the last few weeks because we're getting reports now that the show is, in fact, raising awareness and generating donations. I can't tell you in a time like this, particularly with our good friends in Texas and Oklahoma and Louisiana, in that parts of the Southwest suffering as they are, and they need our love and they need our support in any measures that we can give to them. But again, how can folks contribute to your campaign? And what type of things would you like to do with the money?
Yeah, so you can contribute at mindymcconnell.org. If you are an old school person, that's great. You can mail a check. The address is on that website as well, or you can just click the link to contribute. We do expect the Democrat vote to be split between the three frontrunners, and that will really leave me in a good position. I think I'm on equal footing with the few Republican candidates in this race who are not particularly strong or polling high. So with the Democrats splitting the vote, if I have enough money and I can just run some TV ads, and I think that's a big thing. It's just the visibility there. We have our signs. We're going to get on the radio. We're doing as much as we can with social media. I also need some money to have some firms who do telephone polling, some more targeted demographic outreach. But yeah, those things cost money, and they are what the people are doing. So I just need that, and I think I have a fair chance if I had that.
No, that's outstanding. So I think, have we posted, John, the appropriate link so that folks can donate? Excellent. This is critical. With opportunities comes cost, comes challenges. I can't imagine that. You've got two significant media markets in there that you're having to play in. As opposed to one, which is more often the case in a congressional campaign. Each of them, their own unique constituency, their own distinct flavor, if you will, and you need to pay attention to both. I know that New Orleans Libertarians and Louisiana Libertarians are some of the hardest working people in the country, and I know that they go to great pains to support their candidates, but we need to as well. And so reach out to the campaign. Particularly, God bless, get into that runoff situation. We need to recognize now that that there's a huge opportunity in a time of national crisis to promote a candidate, to get a candidate into the United States Congress who's going to be reflective of the type of solutions that this country needs right now. Final thoughts. Let's pretend for a moment that you're the city of New Orleans is sitting here spellbound to LPTV, and that they're sitting out there in Baton Rouge, and they put down their LSU football hot stove off-season talk now. What do you want to say to the folks of Louisiana right now in a night when so many people are under siege by so many issues?
I would like to say that for so many of our Louisiana citizens, you've been fighting for your rights for years, for decades. And this is the time to decide not to let the government take away the rights that you have been fighting for. That is what's happening. And if you continue to vote for people who are committed to big political machines, these big parties, you're going to get the same results. And we're not happy with the status right now. We have to change it, and we have it within ourselves to change it. But we need the government out of our business and out of our lives so that we can stand up and rise up and support ourselves and support our communities. And I vow to make sure that nobody in Congress expands the government any more than it already is, and that Louisiana rights are protected. We have what we need, and that each person can grow economically and in their families and in their communities.
That's wonderful. Mindy McConnell, we wish you nothing but the best. Please, when you have the specifics of how we can watch and root you on and deluge, if you will, television stations and radio stations with phone calls saying why you're simply the right choice for not just for your congressional district, but for Louisiana and the nation at large, please keep me in touch on that so that we can share that with the Libertarian nation. And again, nothing but the best. Folks, again, another evening where for all those who worry about the future of our candidacies, both on the national level and the local level, where we have an outstanding candidate, well-schooled in libertarian philosophy, someone who articulates it in a sophisticated yet clearly accessible manner and hits the right notes on issues that matter not just to us as libertarians, but, well, to the entire nation at this point. We are right. We are the solution for so many of the challenges facing us this cold winter weekend. Let's help Mindy McConnell get elected to Congress. Mindy, thank you so very much for joining us. And again, please stay in touch.
Thank you so much, Pat. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for Joe. Thank you for joining us this evening. You've been listening to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian National Committee. Joe Bishop Henchman, of course, is the chair. I want to thank, as always, John Gapso, who runs the big board here. I'm your host, Pat Ford. We'll be back next Friday with another quote-unquote down ballot candidate who's going to take the libertarian movement to the very next level. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.